All right, I got test. Let me see. Chris, you in there?
I am here.
Okay, and on Linda's end, good morning. Are you there?
I'm going to put Linda on right now. Hang on 1 second.
Thank you so much.
Hello.
Hey, Linda, how are you?
Pretty good.
Hey, we're just getting to get this thing started. So with the tape's rolling, but we haven't started anything yet. We'll let you know when. So, and we're not going to spoil it all. We'll just do it all live and do it. Okay?
KVOI. It used to be KVOA. Is that still there too?
KVOA is the TV station. Absolutely, Channel 4. Remember Patty Weiss?
The radio station down at the left of the dial. It played a lot of dance music. Dance band music, like
10:30.
So, Linda, Ed Alexander, who you were just talking to, used to be one of the guys at KTKT in the 70s, 990.
No kidding.
So that's why I didn't want to spoil. Let's start the interview, okay, and then we can talk.
Okay.
Okay, great.
Okay.
He's got a big crush on you. I'm just telling you.
Man, have I got a crush on you? Let's do it.
All right. Ready?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Welcome to the Wake Up Tucson show. We are honored to have calling in and promoting a beautiful conversation that she's having at the end of April at the historic Fox Theater. Danny Salisco presents Linda Ronstadt in a conversation with Linda. It is on the evening of April 29th, and it's going to start at 7 p.m. And you please go to foxtucsontheater.com to get your tickets right now. Let's embarrass our guests with the list of honors: 11 Grammys, 3 AMAs, 2 Academy of Country Music Awards, an Emmy, an Alma, which I wish I knew what that was, a Tony Award, a Golden Globe, a Latin Grammy Lifetime Achievement Award, a Grammy Lifetime Achievement Award, and inducted in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2014. And she also was awarded the National Medal of Arts and Humanities, and she has been called the most popular female vocalist of the 1970s. Her name is Linda Ronstadt. Sorry I had to go through the roll call, but it's so due, so thanks
the Alma Award was for the Mexican music.
Yes, okay, excellent. See, that sounds...
Alma means soul in Spanish.
It makes all the sense in the world. So,
and I would always say, I had the privilege of forever saying, Tucson's own Linda Ronstadt, and I'd roll...
that makes me happy.
And I'd roll another one, for years, let me tell you.
So
I listened to KTKT in the 50s and the 60s before I left home. We used to smuggle it into our classroom.
Right.
Transistor radio.
Little transistor radio. Frank Khalil and the gang was on there, and I came right after them in the early 70s, and I was there from 70 to like 85. Played all the hits.
Frank Khalil used to have. I remember his theme song, and then there was a little kind of a when the news was being read.
Uh-huh.
And we could turn when we were in the classroom, we could turn it down low enough so that the nun couldn't hear the music. But you could hear that little, and that would give it away, and then we'd lose our transistor radio.
What school were you avoiding the nuns listening to your radio, Linda?
St. Peter and Paul.
Oh, okay.
They were ferocious. They were really fierce nuns. They were like the ones in Doubt. They were the same order. God. We survived with our lives.
So this is a show that you did about a year ago. You've done it before. And before we dive in, tell people what to expect when they see you at the Fox Theater on April 29th.
Well, it's just a sort of a loose conversation with I've got photographs and audio clips and some video clips, and it roughly follows the outline of my book, which is the book that I wrote that just talks about my musical process. I think that there are a lot of people who are better singers than I am in the 20th century, and I thought, if I'm going to write a book about myself, what is it that I did that was different from what everybody else did? So I decided it was that I sang a lot of different kind of music.
So as a young lady in California in the 60s, and you're doing your work with the Stone Ponies, moving into your solo work, how does your experience of being a girl from Tucson, how did that form and maybe put you in an area that was a little different than the typical female singer in the 60s?
Well, for instance, the rhythm culture that I grew up in was not rhythm and blues, and it wasn't gospel. I listened to that music on the radio when I was little, but we were right close to the border. My family is Mexican. And indigenous Mexican rhythms are totally different from, they're not West African, they're not European, they're Mexican. And I grew up listening to a lot of that, and then also the belting style that Lola Beltran did, who's a ranchera singer, influenced me tremendously, more than any of the contemporary pop singers did when I was singing. So I was always trying to sing her music. And, I knew the songs because we grew up singing them, but I didn't know all the words, and I didn't know how to sing them with the band properly. That took a lot of woodshedding to get right.
So when I hear you talk about that kind of influence, but I also know your appreciation for great American songbook singers such as Ella Fitzgerald, I almost see that merge now more I think about it in your vocal performances, that not just the Nelson Riddle stuff, but a lot of your performances.
Well, the two techniques are a lot more related to each other than they are to rock and roll. Rock and roll is a lot of short note singing and a lot of screaming, which is great. Little Richard. I love Little Richard. Mm-hmm. I love a lot of rock and roll singers. My very favorite being Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. But, I could do other things besides yell and scream short notes, so...
You certainly could.
You have to fit my voice. When I finally started singing standards, I found my true voice. The combination of that and Mexican music gave me the two elements that I had been most influenced by growing up. And I found where my true voice was. And after that, I could sing rock and roll without any problem.
So if your true voice was
authentic voice.
So if your true voice was the albums you did with Mr. Riddle and then Canciones de Mi Padre, who was that Linda Ronstadt selling all those zillions of albums singing in the 70s?
Well, I was trying to do the best I could. Walking into walls, really. I was just searching for something, I was just searching. The artistic process can be a very, very long search for people. It took me 10 years to land on what I was doing. And, when you start up a business, they'll usually tell you that you're going to take 10 years before you even start to turn a profit. So that was kind of like that.
So on the album Hand Sewn, Hand Grown, which was a good album for you, you were considered, quote, alternative country. What does alternative country mean?
I don't know. It was what it really truly was people in California trying to copy the records they'd admired that came out of Nashville for years. And it's a very different sound, the California sound. First of all, there are no drummers that play like the Nashville drummers, that sort of country shuffle. And we had a hard time finding people that play pedal steel guitar. So there were a lot of inventions made to regular six-string guitars that would sort of copy that pedal steel sound, or you'd scrounge up a pedal steel player if you could get him. And that twangy sound. You had
a little bit of...
was singing in my own accent. Country music sort of demands a southern accent in order to sound right. And I'd sort of be torn back and forth between it because I just didn't speak with my own accent.
Did you ever worry about going to too much twang when you sang?
We twanged as hard as we could until we got tired of it and we did something else. Yeah. When you admire something, you copy it. Everybody copies when they're learning how to play music. Everybody does. And you copy until you copy as hard as you can, and then when you hear the playback, you find out that you don't sound anything like the person you're copying, and that shocks you so badly you find out your own way to sing.
That could be the alternative title for your book. I'm twanging as hard as I can. That's what you say.
Trying not to suck. That's the other thing you do. You try not to suck. People say, how do you do this? I say, well, you just sing it until it doesn't suck.
So let's talk about your rise to being, you went to Stone Ponies, you're doing your solo career, and then all of a sudden you're playing big giant arenas, you're on magazine covers. Talk about what kind of trip your head went through that, and how did you struggle to stay grounded, because all of a sudden you were the it girl for a lot of years in that decade.
Well, it happened by degrees. The Stone Ponies, I had a big hit with the Stone Ponies. That was a top 10 hit. So that I got to cruise on that for a little while, and that got us onto television, or got me onto television, because the Stone Ponies then broke up, and one of them went to India, and the other one went to real estate school. So Bob Kimmel, who is still a dear friend, he lives in Tucson now.
Shep?
No, Bob Kimmel.
Oh, cool. Okay.
So then I got a hit as a solo artist, the next one a couple years later, And that bought me some time of doing some television shows and got me second act on the college circuit tour, you know.
Sure.
So then I was playing with people like Neil Young. Suddenly I was, I had a club act, but all of a sudden I was on stage at Madison Square Garden with my club act. So I had to do a little, catching up. But we did pretty well on that tour, and that gave us a lot of exposure. And then I had a huge hit with You're No Good, and I had my own tours in Coliseums. And I was unhappy about that. I didn't like playing those big halls. They're not fun for the audience, and they're not fun for the performer. But once you get them, there's nobody that's going to work to get you into a smaller hall where you make most money. Because they make less money, too.
So basically, in the end, it was basically the impersonal nature of the arena show is the part that you didn't like?
Physically, they don't have the proportions or the construction to focus your attention down on the stage. There's no proscenium stage.
Right.
And it's very bad for sound. Sound just rolls around in the rafters until it just decays about 12 years later. So you're hearing the rumble of 3 nights ago concert, The guitar is still rumbling around in the rafters.
So we've talked to other musical acts who had their rise in the 70s, and we talk about why the 70s was such an amazing time to record is the idea that, of course, you were able to be creative with your music, right? Technology, sound-wise, was getting better and better, and you guys had the freedom to kind of pursue your thing, didn't you?
Well, we had a mecca. I mean, the pop music record business had been controlled pretty much by New York, and then Atlanta, Muscle Shoals, Detroit. And all of a sudden, it was Los Angeles' turn. And in fact, all culture was coming to Los Angeles. All culture was being focused, pop culture was being focused through the cultural lens of Los Angeles. Even if you think of shows like All in the Family, which was a sitcom about an East Coast family, but it was written and made and distributed through Los Angeles.
Sure.
So Los Angeles was the cultural lens. It was like Berlin and the Weimar Republic. It was the lens you had to be able to pass through in order to be distributed far and wide. So it was only a day's drive away from Tucson. It was where I landed when I decided to go out and seek my fortune. I wanted to go to a place that had a bigger musician pool and more appreciation for the kind of a little bit more complex music that I liked that was a combination of roots, folk music, and pop music. And I was essentially a ballad singer, so I kept looking for that great ballad that would get me over the top. And I found it.
Now, I think you have written and published a couple of songs. Why did you not go a little deeper? I know, like Try Me Again, what you did with Andrew Gold, but... Yeah,
Andrew didn't really write any of that song. I wrote all of it, but he played the guitar for me when I was writing the bridge.
Gotcha.
Give him half credit. But, that song wrote itself. I was sitting in the car one day, and I was driving home from the city out to my house in Malibu, and the first 2 verses wrote themselves. And when I got home, I said, I'll just finish this song. I got my guitar out, nothing. Got in the car the next day to drive back to the studio. The rest of the song wrote itself.
Do you remember Do you remember the first two? Do you remember the first 2 verses?
Oh God, I have to.
That's okay. I'll find them. Keep going.
But when I got to the studio, I had written the bridge, but I couldn't play the chords because they were too far up the neck. So I asked Andrew to do it, and he did. And I finished it, and we recorded it that day.
So
I think writing is a gift that some people have. I don't think I could have gotten up every morning and sharpened my pencil and gone, I'm going to write a song. I mean, there were people around that were doing that so well, Carla Bonoff and Andrew Gold and Neil Young, Randy Newman. There were just a whole bunch, Eric Kaz wrote one song after another that I wanted to record. Warren Zevon, Jacqueline Brown, J.D. Souther. Why bother when you have such an embarrassment of riches,
So in the 70s, what was your criteria as you're looking for songs that you thought were good for you to record? What was kind of your criteria?
It was really hard to make everything fit because it was the singer-songwriter era. People wrote songs tailored to their own voices instead of, it's the opposite of the George Gershwin era when they wrote songs that they thought would fit in other people's voices. Lots of people recorded their songs in different ways. But, like J.D. Souther would write a song that would fit in his voice perfectly and be a stretch for mine. Or Randy Newman would write a song that would fit in nobody's voice but his own. and it was really hard to sing. Or even Joni Mitchell, her stuff would be really hard to cover. So I'd look for, the criteria was to find a song that expressed what my life was. I could tell my story through the song, but also something that fit my voice, that gave my voice an opportunity to perform up in the areas that I performed best.
Well, so, did some of the guys, after I started catching on, kind of be able to write for you a little bit? Because, you guys would hang out together and they would know your style. And
no, they only wrote for themselves.
Is that right? Is that how it goes? Interesting.
I think that's kind of part of the artistic process. Okay. What occurs to you is what occurs to you. You can't. It's hard to tailor it to somebody else's needs, and when you try to do it, it usually doesn't work.
So
kind of do what comes out.
Tell me about the importance of Peter Asher as a producer. It sounded like you were looking for someone who was more of someone who could work with you, and that you were not working for them. Tell me about how important Peter is.
Well, Peter was. I can't overstate how important he was, because Peter is, first of all, a gentleman. He's very well educated. He's very smart. He'd had a long career starting as a child actor. His sister is a famous movie actress, Jane Asher. And then he was in a boys' choir, and then he was in a hit rock and roll band, Peter and Gordon. And then He was the A&R man of Apple Records, which was the Beatles record label. And his sister Jane was Paul McCartney's girlfriend. Paul McCartney used to live at their house. So he was really close with all those guys. And he knew the business inside and out. And he was, at that point, James Taylor's manager and producer when I asked him if he'd manage me. And he understood the more sensitive, sort of artier songs that I wanted to record, songs like Heart Like a Wheel. He got that. Where other producers that I'd worked with, or the record company would just say, that song's too corny, it'll never be a hit. And I'd say, it may be corny and not a hit, but it's a great song. And I want to record great songs. So that's what we did. The first thing we recorded was Heart Like a Wheel. And for the album, I threw on some of the songs I was singing in my club acts, like You're No Good. And they turned out to be the hits, but Heart Like a Wheel stayed with me to the very end of my career.
One concert I have to ask you about is 1978 Tucson Convention Center, singing Tumbling Dice with Mick Jagger. How did that happen?
He called me and said, we're having a hard time getting airplay on they'd made a record, they wanted to get it on the country stations, which I knew they weren't going to do, because they were the Rolling Stones. They weren't a country act. But they made a really good record. So they said, can you come over here? We're going to try to get it on the country radio station in Tucson. And I said, okay. So they introduced me as a local girl that was going to come up and sing, and it was me. He was just trying to curry favor, I think, with the local radio guys.
I just love there was a moment in time where Tucson, Arizona radio station was trying to get curried favored by Mick Jagger.
That's pretty cool.
Well, in those days, you could still have a regional breakout,
Yep.
I mean, by the 80s, you couldn't radio didn't operate like that. But in the 70s, you could get, you could get a hit in some region and not in another. Or if it was a hit in one region, then the rest of the country might pick up on it.
So how did you know, how did your relationship with Mick Jagger, that he knew he could call you and you would come on stage and sing with him?
Oh, he came to my shows.
Okay.
And it was a friend of Peter's. A friend of Peter actually introduced me. We used to hang out a lot. One of the other guys in the Stones, Ronnie Wood, had a rented house on the beach, a few houses down from mine in Malibu. So we used to hang out and play music all together.
Gotcha. As a kid growing up, I grew up in the New York City area, and one of my first visual remembrances of Linda Ronstadt is Pirates of Penzance.
Oh, my gosh. That was so much fun. We had a ridiculous amount of fun doing that show.
So that show was so huge in the 80s. How did you get hooked into doing Pirates of Penzance on Broadway?
Well, I'll tell you. See, I hated playing those Coliseums. I wanted to play on a stage with the proper proscenium.
Right.
That's a theater stage.
Yep.
So John Rockwell, who works for the New York Times and is a friend of mine, said, well, you should go talk to Joe Papp at the New York Public Theater. He does shows with the proscenium. I'd never heard of Joe Papp. I didn't know him from Adams Off Ox. So I went down to meet him and thought he was really charming. I said, I want to play on the stage with a proscenium and a curtain. And he looked at me like I was a raving moron and went on about his day, and I don't think he gave it another thought, except that he had somebody working at the Public Theater called Wilfred Leach, who was one of his directors, who wanted to do, let's see what happened. Joe lost his funding from the city for Shakespeare,
right,
to do in the Delacorte, so he said, hell with him, since he lost his funding, he wasn't going to do Shakespeare that summer, he was going to do Gilbert and Sullivan. So he hired Wilfred Leach to be the director. And Joe wanted to do the Mikado, but Wilfred didn't like the Mikado. So he went to the record store and looked at Gilbert Sullivan stuff and came home with Pirates of Penzance and said he liked that one. And then coincidentally, John Rockwell was on television on the Today Show talking about me and my new album. And Wilfred Leach was watching the Today Show, and he said, that's who I want to be Mabel. I want to have a pop star. I want to have pop singers sing the leads, and he liked my voice. So he called up Joe and said, I'd really like to get Linda Ronstadt to sing the part of Mabel. And Joe said, oh, she was here a month ago. She wants to work for us. So that's how I got the part.
I just remember that TV. I can actually still visualize the commercial, Linda, in my head with your face in it. Like, totally.
For Pirates?
Yes, for Pirates, totally. It was played so many times on WPIX and WOR in New York when I was living there.
Is that TV or radio?
TV.
See, I never had a TV for about 30 years, so I never know what goes on. I love the radio. As a medium, you could have just stopped there with it, not gone any farther with the electronic media, and be happy with just radio.
Well, we'll get into technology and music in a little bit. I do want to get to your Nelson Riddle recordings because they're some of my favorites. I am an old school guy. I love big band, Sinatra, Ella Fitzgerald. I can listen to Joe Stafford till my head falls off.
Oh yeah, I love her voice.
Tell me about hooking up with, one of the greatest band leader arrangers and doing these 3 albums.
Well, I'd listened to them a lot when I was a kid growing up, and I had everything memorized, just everything. And when I was in New York singing Pirates, I was kind of reluctant to go back to the same stuff I'd been doing because I wasn't very satisfied with my work up till then. I didn't think my phrasing was any good, and I just didn't feel like I was standing on a strong enough foundation. So I thought to myself, the way to go forward is always to move backward. You study what came before you and study it well, and you get a better foundation to stand on. So it started with just that I wanted to start studying some of the earlier singers to see if I could get my phrasing better. And the head of Atlantic Records at that time, whose name I can't remember because I can't remember any names.
It's not Irving. I'm thinking Armin. Ertekin? Armin?
Not Ahmet. It was
Ahmet. Okay.
The other one.
Asimov. Right.
All right. We'll figure it out.
He'll come to me. I mean, I can see him standing there. I used to stay at his house. He had an extensive record collection of jazz records, and all those singers, Ella Fitzgerald and June Christie and names again, Sarah Vaughan.
Sure.
Did I say Ella Fitzgerald? And Billie Holiday, the most important of all of them. She was the most important one. So I said, I'm going to come over and listen to your records. And so I did. I started listening to them. A lot of them were records my dad had when I was growing up. And then he said, you could make a record like this. And I said, oh, no, I can't sing that well. And he said, no, you could sing that stuff. You got a good voice for it. So I said, okay, well, maybe I should learn some of them. And he said, well, I can get a band together and you can rehearse them. And then when we got the band together and I started singing them, then it was like, well, let's record them. So I started rehearsing and recording in the afternoon before I could have to go in and sing the show at Pirates. And we put down some demos, but I didn't really like working with this guy. He produced a lot of Aretha Franklin records, but he didn't really know the music. He was kind of like the technical producer. And he wasn't the engineer either. I was used to working with somebody that gave me a very tight fit.
Right.
I was used to having my hands on the board. He'd say things like, I'll play you the mix over the phone. And I go, no, the way it works on the phone, you can't get all the sound. You can't tell them that. You can't judge a mix over the phone. I didn't like anybody mixing my stuff unless I was there. So we've had a falling of the ways, but then I decided that the record was a good idea, so I asked Peter to do it. And Peter was very reluctant to do it, but he's so good at carrying out my whim, he agreed to do it. And I was trying to find I kept saying I wanted to have a director, an arranger that worked that sounded like Nelson Riddle and who could write like him. I was going out with this guy, Pete Hamill. You probably remember Pete Hamill from New York. He was
sure, I do.
A writer there. He said, why don't you just get Nelson Riddle? I didn't even know he was still alive or would take a phone call from me or anything. So I called Nelson Riddle and asked him to come over. It turned out he didn't know who I was. He asked his daughter. His daughter said she thought he'd be able to work with me. And he came over to the studio, and we sat down at the piano and started going through songs, and the next thing we were making an album.
Well, when you hit with What's New, that first one, and I've Got a Crush on You, Sweetie Pie, I think yours is still the definitive version of that song.
Oh, I learned to sing it better after I had it on stage for a while. I think I rushed through it a little bit on the recording. I never listened to those recordings. I was just learning the songs when I recorded them. Like, What's New was the first time I ever sang through it in my key.
Really?
Recording, yeah. Because I couldn't rehearse with the orchestra. It's too expensive.
Right.
And I can't read music. I didn't know what the chart was going to look like. The orchestra ran the chart down once with me listening. I stepped up to the mic and sang. That was the run-through. I stepped up to the mic and sang the first take. We did two more, and we kept the first one. That was it.
Well,
so I learned how to sing it a lot better after I'd sung it a couple of times.
Well, and the commercial success of that was so big that, you got to do two more, so.
Well, I think the quality of the material was a lot responsible for that, That kind of songwriting craft didn't exist in the second half of the 20th century. There was very high craft that existed, but not that. The people that could do the second half of the 20th century are people like Paul Simon and, Bob Dylan is his own planet, but I mean, they're really high level of craftsmanship. Leonard Cohen, Joni Mitchell, Jackson Browne, they were really good songwriters, but they didn't do what George Gershwin and his brother did. Rodgers and Hart. There's really no comparison. That level of orchestration. Very, very clever, intelligent, layered, nuanced, intellectual, funny, smart lyric writing. We don't have that now.
So I find very interesting when you talk about yourself and when you sing, you seem to be kind of very self-critical and hard on yourself sometimes. Where does that come from?
Well, I took a long time to learn. I was just wandering around, walking into walls, literally. Just was searching for what to do. When I landed on it, I had a pretty good idea of it, but it took me a long time to land on it. The last years I sang, before I got Parkinson's disease, were my strongest. I sang my best in the 80s and the 90s. And then by the year 2000, I had Parkinson's disease, and I had no voice.
So you say that because basically, after walking into all those walls, you all those lessons all piled up to make you into the best Linda Ronstadt you could be?
Yeah, so just searching through all those categories of music, I found all these different areas of my voice that I could then take and use. I'd learned to sing. I'd listened to so much Mexican music when I first started singing rock and roll in the late 60s. It didn't apply to that style of rock and roll, so I had all these colors in my paint box that I couldn't use. And I liked the songs that I was getting, in the 60s that I was finding. I liked Jackson Browne and J.D. Souther. But they weren't the best, highest use of my voice. They're the best, highest use of their voices.
Tell me.
And the tricks that I had, the tools that I had didn't necessarily apply to them.
Tell me about the dynamics of working with Emmylou Harris and Dolly Parton, because that's some combo right there.
The first time I heard Emmylou sing, all I wanted to do was sing with her. I mean, I had no other thought in my head then for years other than I wanted to sing with Emmylou. And when we sat and sang together, I thought, this is my singing sister. My own sister sang too. We used to sing together, but with Emmylou, it was like about 70 notches upward. So, and then I had met Dolly independently of Emmy, and Emmy had met her independently of me. And she wound up at Emmy's house one day, sort of quite unexpected. And so Emmy immediately picked up the phone and called me and said, Dolly Parton's at my house, you have to come. So I jumped in my car and went over there. And, I walked in there and they were talking about something. When three musicians are in a room and there's a guitar in the room, the guitar's going to come out and you're going to start singing. It's just inevitable. So Emmy picked up the guitar and started playing a Carter family song, "Bury Me Beneath the Willow." And, of course, Dolly and I both knew the harmonies, and we added harmonies. It was just as natural as rain. And we were actually a little shocked at how it sounded, because it was really a beautiful sound. You know, because our voices have just the qualities that complement each other. Dolly has that beautiful, high, bubbly, soaring, kind of silvery sound, and my voice is heavier, kind of like lead. My voice is kind of like the emulsifier, and Emmy has that kind of prayerful, a lot of artifact in her voice quality of, you think her last prayer before they cut her head off at the guillotine is that quality in her singing.
See, with lines like that, you should have wrote more songs. Now, is Dolly Parton as cool as she seems?
Oh, she's very funny. She's unique. There's only one Dolly Parton, but she's a really good singer. I mean, she's got real serious musicianship, and she writes about 7 or 8 songs a week, and the good ones are really good.
So let's move on to Canciones de Mi Padre. So now you're full circle, right? Right? After you went from 60, you walked into a lot of walls, and then you ended back into the songs of your father and your family and your upbringing. So how did that happen? How did the circle become complete?
Well, the songs that I was getting to record weren't inspiring me, The singer-songwriter phenomenon kind of went into a decline in the 80s, I think.
Sure.
With some notable exceptions. John Hyatt was a really good writer. Not in the 80s really so much as toward the end of the 80s. I love Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. He's a great songwriter. But songs for me were sort of not, I wasn't finding them. And I kept thinking, I sang better songs when I was a little kid with my family. They were really good songs. Those songs are world-class, beautiful songs, beautifully constructed, beautiful poetry. The Mexicans have a long, reverent tradition for poetry that is not matched in the northern United States. And I wanted to sing that music. I thought it would be more fun. So by that time they were having the Tucson Mariachi conference, and my dad invited me to come over and see it. And that way I got to meet the Mariachi Vargas. And I asked them if they would record with me, and they were shocked. How could I? I gave them a list of what I wanted to record, and they said, "Oh, these songs are really hard. They're really old." I said, "Well, they're the only ones I know, so let's get at it." And we did, and we put the show together, and it was a success. I mean, they had no excuse being a success. We had no way of guaranteeing that it would be. It was just like the Nelson Riddle stuff. I had to do it. I couldn't ignore it. It was music that was blaring in my head.
We have a friend of ours, Joe, who loves this album so much that whenever we're at a beach in Mexico, this album always comes out.
Oh, that's great.
Always. So here's a question for you. Let's talk about your hometown Tucson a little bit. Because you used to live here, you're living in Northern California, and I know now. How has Tucson changed as you've gone back and forth to visit family from 70s, 80s, and beyond?
Well, the most annoying thing was the switch from the downtown. That was really heartbreaking. That, the downtown was not able to maintain its integrity for a while. And that had a lot to do with not having public transportation and, the financial stuff, the retail stuff all going into the malls.
So like when the Seal Petersons and all those clothes and stuff like that.
Yeah, all those beautiful stores were downtown, and my dad's hardware store.
Right.
They got so much competition from the chains. My dad had a really good hardware store that sold really high-quality tools and really good equipment, and they guaranteed their equipment. They stood behind it. When the big box stores came in like Home Depot, they couldn't compete against that. So that decentralized the town. It used to be you'd put your hat and gloves on and go downtown and go to the movie or go to dinner. Or, there were awnings on the sidewalks so it wasn't so hot. And the movie was air conditioned to, Eskimo level. And it was really great. The downtown was fun. And I know it's coming back. I'm really delighted to see it's coming back, even though they have built those Stalinesque buildings down there. They look like East Berlin.
But the Fox Theater is beautiful.
The Fox Theater is great, and the other theater, the Rialto's great. Mm-hmm. And the few buildings they left standing that have awnings are great. And the food is great. My God, the food was not great when I was living there. But, there's all those growing seasons and all those local farmers. There's no reason in the world why the food shouldn't be great.
What are some of your favorite local Tucson restaurants you like to go to?
Well, I love Bianco's. And I love Cafe Poca Cosa. And the other ones I don't know well enough that their names, but I ate at some place, I can't remember, Urban something, that had a lot of pickled vegetables. I was impressed with that.
Well, Tucson has a great food scene, so.
There was a sushi place at Broadway and Country Club that I thought was pretty good.
Oh, that's Sushi Garden.
Yeah, right on the corner there, yeah.
So,
Jostler's.
No, there's a place over there I want you to check out when you're here in April. It's called Barrio Bread. And
oh, yeah, I want to go there.
That guy, Don Guetta, is one of the nicest guys and an amazing, he's an artist, that guy.
I wonder what kind of wheat he uses.
He's using the wheat he's getting it grown in Marana. It's all local. And he's going to kill me because he's totally using Sonoran white wheat and a couple other things.
Yeah, see, that's what I grew up eating with Sonoran white wheat. Then NAFTA came along, and with the price supports that they give American farmers, wheat farmers and corn farmers, it destroyed the wheat business in Mexico, and it destroyed the corn business. And so they just grow alfalfa down there now and sorghum. They don't grow. Sonora was the breadbasket of Mexico.
Yep.
And all that beautiful wheat was grown there, and that's what they made the tortillas out of. That's why the tortillas taste like gummy hardtack now. I can't eat a commercial tortilla.
Neither can we.
They're horrible. Tortillas used to be the best thing you could eat in your life,
Well, Anita Street Market's still making it happen over on St. Mary's in Granada, so.
But it's not the same wheat.
Yeah.
It doesn't have the same properties. I can get good tortillas in Mexico still, but they're not even in Mexico. They're not even making it with the Sonoran white wheat because they're not growing it.
Well, the Sonoran white wheat is making a comeback. It's one of the reasons we actually got that UNESCO City of Gastronomy designation from the UN.
Right.
So it's on a comeback. When you come here, you should be able to walk away with lots of Sonoran white wheat stuff.
And a Sonoran hot dog from Huero Canelo.
Yeah.
I love that. I never eat junk food, ever. I don't eat hamburgers. I don't eat Cokes. I don't eat hot dogs. As soon as I get to Tucson, I go right there and eat a Sonoran hot dog. They're so delicious.
I do a food
place I like in Tucson, too, called Govinda's Garden.
Sure. Govinda's is still there.
It's a real sleeper place. The food is delicious.
Is that the place with the peacocks running around the backyard?
Yeah, and the Hare Krishnas, but they don't bother you. It's so good. I used to take my kids there all the time to eat because you could eat pretty cheaply, and the food was really excellent. It wasn't junk food.
No, she's doing the all-natural thing over there, so it's good stuff. So here you are. You have this career, and then a few years ago you get diagnosed with Parkinson's, which no one expects this is going to happen to them.
Right.
And you can't sing anymore. My wife, who's a knitter, we were listening to your interview where you said you can't knit anymore. She felt your pain.
God, listen, knitters just love to knit. I mean, you just don't want those needles out of your hand. And you're looking always for the ultimate sweater pattern and the ultimate yarn. It's there somewhere. You're going to find it in the very next knitting store. There was a great knitting store in Tucson. That was one of the best things about living there. Is a great knitting store. They had beautiful yarns.
I'm the guy who gets dragged in the yarn stores by his wife in any city in America we go to, so always looking for that yarn.
It's just the unknown yarn is there, so it's going to be on a shelf someplace behind somebody, and it's going to make you so happy. I just love to knit. I knit all my kids' sweaters. I just love it. That's a really hard thing to lose. I like to sew, too, and embroider, but I can't do any of those things anymore.
So what is this next stage of your life? What is it now? What is because you're obviously a driven, passionate human being. So what does this next stage look like? What are you doing? I know you're trying to get the message out that you can live with Parkinson's. What is Linda Ronstadt 2018? What does that look like now?
Well, I can't do those things like knitting and sewing and singing and dancing that I used to be able to do. So I look around to other people and help them do it. I work with a little group here called Los Sensuales. It's a cultural center.
Yep.
It's in a strip mall here in Richmond, the city of Richmond, which is Bookie Town. And they do the best job of teaching kids art I've ever seen anywhere. They teach them art, music, and dancing, how to play instruments, visual art, and they do the most beautiful performance. It's not like they're teaching them how to be performers or trained seals. They're teaching them how to really play music, really dance, really sing, really do beautiful art that comes right from your soul. And it's not a slow process. It takes a long time to learn how to play music well. And the kids start when they're 5, and they go through high school, and they come up playing really well, dancing really well, and they can use it for their social lives. They have a little performing group that goes on stage too, and they're always very impressive. But the kids, when they have parties, they sing and dance that music. They can play it.
Sure.
If they have something, a story they want to tell or something, emotion they want to express, they paint a picture. You know how to do it when they come out of there. And it's done in Spanish and English. And they know the kids, they know their families, and they have a way higher success rate in terms of college graduation, no teen pregnancy, more people attend, high school graduation, more kids go to college. It's really the best little group I've ever been associated with. I've been involved with them for 30 years now.
Well, when you fill a kid's life with lots of good things, there's not room for some of those other things to invade. And that's what you guys are doing.
Well, it's so cool. Whenever I take a musician there, they really get it, because they see what the quality of the music is the kids are playing. I took Ry Cooder. He just fell in love with them. Jackson Brown's just recorded something with them. Taj Mahal, I took him. He loved it. The Los Lobos already knew about them, so I went into them all the time. They're big patrons of them. It's really fun.
Is this something you guys could take more national or regionally and get it out there more?
Well, I introduced them to the Chieftains, and the Chieftains took them on a European tour.
Okay.
And they go to Mexico to learn new stuff. They do field trips. They've been to Washington. They've traveled around, but they do outreach programs too. They play for migrant groups a lot.
You bring them to Tucson one day.
There's a bunch of people that are living at the racetrack that they have laborers that are not paid very well, mostly undocumented immigrants that work on the racetracks. They work really hard. They have to live in the horse stalls. It's a very marginal kind of labor situation, and they go over and do shows for them.
What's Linda Ronstadt listening to lately? What's who
I've been listening to is Alma Deutscher. You've heard of her?
Tell me more about Alma Deutscher.
She's a prodigy classical music composer. She also plays the violin and piano brilliantly. And she started composing she started playing when she was 2. The piano and the violin when she was 3. She started composing when she was 4. But by the time she was 9, she had a piano concerto, a violin concerto, and an opera, all on stage and performed in Vienna. She's really good. Well,
I already just loaded her up on my Spotify while you were talking, so.
You might want to look at her on YouTube.
Okay.
AlmaDeutschscher. She's a child, so the music that she plays is about her childish experiences. And she's a happy child, so
that helps.
The music is just joyous, bouncy music, but it's really well executed. She knows exactly what she's doing. She's taken very seriously by the classical world. She's not patronized. They see her as one of them. She's charming, and I also seen her give interviews in German, Hebrew, and English.
Wow.
And I've read her dad's book. Her dad is a linguistics professor in Oxford, I think. And he wrote a book that's really good called Through the Language Glass, about how we affect language and then it affects our culture. It's really interesting.
He's University of Manchester, Guy Deutscher. This is what his name is.
If you ever get your hands on one of his books, it's really worth reading. He's a great writer. And his first language is Hebrew. Writes beautifully in English.
Are you gravitating more towards classical music as you move on?
I listen to a lot of opera. I love opera. I can't help it. And on YouTube, I can hear 5 different sopranos sing an aria from La Traviata and compare them. It's really fun.
So when you get to Tucson for your show on April 29th, what are you going to do leading up to the show? What do you do when you get to Tucson? What are some of the things you need to do when you get to Tucson, other than
get that hot dog? It's one of the first things I do. And I visit with family. I have a new little niece that I'm just wild about. She's 1. Have to see her. And I have a lot of really good friends in Tucson that I miss dearly.
Well, we look forward to seeing you on April 29th. It's Sunday night, 7 p.m. Danny Zelisko, of course, who's promoted in Arizona forever.
Right, I know his name.
He's promoting this, and it's at the Fox Theater. Go to foxtucsontheater.com to get your tickets. It's a conversation with Miss Linda Ronstadt. Well, Linda,
my dad used to sing at the Fox Theater in the 20s. It was called Gil Ronstadt and his small Star-Spangled Megaphone. That's before microphones.
That's a great name. I love that.
Gil Ronstadt and his Star-Spangled Megaphone.
I like that. Gil Ronstadt and his Star-Spangled Megaphone. That's amazing.
Right.
Well, thank you for spending so much time with us. I had a great time. Ed and I had a great time talking with you today.
Okay, if you need anything else, just holler.
You got it, and we look forward to seeing you in April.
Great. Bye.
All right, take care, Linda. That's Miss Linda Ronstadt. Had a great time talking with Linda. We'll be right back after the break. Wake Up Tucson, 10:30, The Voice.